The divorce papers hit the desk with a heavy thud, the ink of the final signature still drying. Ryan thought he was upgrading his life by trading me for a flawless socialite. He didn't know he was trading his freedom for a lie. I didn't shed a single tear. I just realized the man I had invested my youth in was a stranger, and the woman he was about to marry didn't even exist. Please drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Grief was inefficient, and I had never been an inefficient woman. As the heavy wooden doors of the courthouse closed behind me, I didn't succumb to panic or despair. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. I drove back to my apartment, made a black coffee, and opened my laptop. I was a senior data manager, and while Ryan had severed our marital contract, his fledgling real estate startup had forgotten to sever my administrative access to their cloud servers. It was a lazy oversight on his part. He was so obsessed with the new visionary image that he never bothered to initiate the offboarding protocols. It was a glaring security oversight, one I decided to audit. I didn't ask why he left. I simply opened the system logs and began following the digital paper trail. It didn't take long to find the anomaly. Ryan was preparing for the biggest real estate pitch of his career the very next morning, securing capital for a massive commercial development. But the numbers in the primary ledger were bleeding. Using my residual credentials, I bypassed the standard firewalls and pulled up the master financial directory. There it was, a recent, highly obfuscated transfer of $500,000. Ryan hadn't just secured seed funding, he had quietly siphoned $500,000 of investor capital into an offshore shell account registered under Tiffany's name. It was embezzlement, plain and simple. I didn't move the funds myself that would be illegal. Instead, I triggered an automated compliance hold using my administrative credentials, flagging the offshore routing as a suspicious, unauthorized transaction. He was planning to pitch investors while actively robbing them. I stared at the screen, my heart beating at a perfectly normal resting rate. This wasn't a breakdown, it was a balance sheet. He had stolen the foundation of our life, and now he was stealing from his own company. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon a shred of regret for what I was about to do, but there was only clarity. I initiated a root-level override. With methodical keystrokes, I locked the offshore account. I didn't keep the money. That would be theft. Instead, I established a secure routing protocol and transferred the entire $500,000 directly back into his company's restricted escrow account, flagging it as a suspicious transaction requiring a full board review to unlock. It was 11:51 at night. By 12:03 in the morning, the operation was complete. I watched the progress bar hit 100%. The money was locked away, entirely inaccessible to him, right on the eve of his defining presentation. He was going to walk into that boardroom expecting to have a massive financial safety net, completely unaware that his accounts were frozen and his theft was documented in the company's own escrow logs. I hovered my cursor over the final execution command. I didn't hesitate. I just pressed cancel on his fraudulent safety net. Sitting in the pale glow of my monitor, I calculated the exact return on investment for the past 5 years. Our marriage had never been a partnership. It had been a subscription, with me footing the entire bill. I had been the silent investor in his version of reality. While he networked at high-end galas and played the role of the visionary entrepreneur, I was the one managing the household logistics. I paid off his early credit card debts. I quietly fixed the glaring errors in his business proposals before they went to print. I absorbed his stress and converted it into stability. People often ask why someone stays in an unbalanced contract for so long. The truth is, the invisible chain of the survivor isn't forged in a single day. It is built link by link through slow, methodical manipulation. Ryan had expertly gaslit me into believing my contributions were basic expectations, while his mere presence was a gift. When you invest so much of your own emotional and financial capital into a failing enterprise, the sunk cost fallacy takes over. You convince yourself that if you just work a little harder, if you just cover one more mistake, the investment will finally mature. It wasn't weakness that kept me there. It was a misplaced, blind faith in my own emotional investment. I had tolerated his growing coldness because I thought we were building an empire together. I excused his late nights and shifting moods as the necessary collateral damage of a startup founder's life, but every time I covered a deficit, he simply expanded his ego. He took my competence for granted and decided he needed a trophy to match his fabricated success. He didn't want a partner who knew how the sausage was made. He wanted a pristine audience. That was why he found Tiffany. She was the shiny, high society asset he felt he deserved. A woman who didn't know about his maxed-out credit lines or his tendency to panic under pressure. He discarded me because I was a mirror reflecting his actual, mediocre reality. Looking back, I realized the affection I thought we shared was just an operational expense. He had drained my resources until he found a more glamorous acquisition. But standing up from my desk, I felt the heavy, invisible chain dissolve into dust. The transaction was finalized. The debts were written off. I was no longer his silent partner, and I was certainly no longer protecting his assets. I closed my laptop, the quiet hum of the machine, the only sound in the room, and prepared for the market to open. The fallout was immediate and predictable. At 9 a.m, Ryan walked into his pitch. By 10:15, he discovered the locked escrow account and the glaring flag on his attempted embezzlement. His panic must have been absolute, but his response was surprisingly aggressive. Rather than admitting his failure, he chose to double down. If he was going down, he was determined to take me with him. The smear campaign launched before noon. Ryan and Tiffany synchronized a brutal marketing assault across their social circles and professional networks. My phone began to buzz with notifications. They were painting me as the unstable, unemployed ex-wife who couldn't handle the divorce. Ryan sent out a mass email to his board members and mutual friends, claiming that I had maliciously hacked his company to steal funds out of pure, unhinged jealousy. Tiffany amplified it, posting tearful updates about how they were just trying to start their new life while being harassed by a bitter woman. They expected me to break. They wanted me to issue frantic denials, to call them screaming, to prove their narrative of an unstable, hysterical ex. But anger wasn't loud this time. I didn't engage. I didn't defend myself to people who were eager to believe a lie. I treated their slander like a data leak, methodically containing and analyzing the breach. I opened a new, encrypted folder on my desktop. With clinical precision, I began taking screenshots of every social media post, every fabricated timeline, and every defamatory comment. I downloaded the mass email he sent to his investors. I archived the direct messages from mutual acquaintances who had bought into his narrative. I wasn't just observing a meltdown, I was compiling a comprehensive legal dossier. Every lie they posted was another documented instance of defamation. Every claim Ryan made about me stealing the money was easily disproven by the very server logs I had carefully preserved, logs that showed the $500,000 sitting untouched in his own company's escrow, flagged by his own offshore routing attempt. They were working overtime to build a narrative of my instability, completely unaware that they were just generating admissible evidence. I sipped my coffee and watched the data accumulate. They thought they were destroying my reputation, but they were simply handing me the rope they would soon hang themselves with. I filed the final screenshot, closed the folder, and moved on to the next phase of the audit. With Ryan's digital footprint secured, I turned my analytical focus toward his new acquisition. Tiffany, the flawless socialite. The woman who supposedly had everything I lacked. Ryan had paraded her pedigree around like a corporate brochure, an exclusive Swiss boarding school, a wealthy coastal lineage, and a trust fund that supposedly justified her lack of employment. But data is impartial, and data rarely matches a carefully curated marketing brochure. I accessed standard public records first, then utilized deeper, encrypted background checking databases I relied on for corporate data verification. I started cross-referencing her provided birth dates, her supposed graduation years, and her financial footprints. Instantly, the algorithms began returning fragmented, contradictory errors. The social security number linked to her current credit lines had only been active for 10 years. There was no financial history, no tax records, and no property leases prior to that exact decade mark. It was a digital ghost town. I dug deeper into the Swiss boarding school she claimed to have attended. I accessed digital yearbooks and alumni registries. There was a Tiffany listed in the graduating class, she claimed, but the facial recognition matching didn't align. The girl in the yearbook had different bone structure, a different jawline. I ran a reverse image search on the archival photos and hit a localized news obituary from 10 years ago. The real Tiffany had died in a tragic multi-car collision on a rainy highway exactly 10 years prior. The woman currently sleeping in Ryan's bed, the woman posting tearful videos about my supposed instability, was a complete fabrication. She was a high school dropout with a string of petty fraud charges who had somehow acquired a deceased girl's identity to reboot her life. She had assumed the dead woman's name, her pristine credit score, and her wealthy backstory, riding it all the way into the arms of an arrogant tech executive who was too obsessed with appearances to run a basic background check. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. The sheer magnitude of the criminal twist was breathtaking. Ryan had traded our marriage for a ghost. I didn't feel triumph, only a cold, mechanical satisfaction. I compiled the death certificate, the original police report of the accident, the biometric discrepancies, and the forged identity documents. I merged it all into a single, encrypted master file. The trap wasn't just set, it was completely, inescapably sealed. I had everything I needed to liquidate their fraudulent empire. The climax arrived on a Thursday. I was sitting in my new, glass-walled office at the engineering firm that had hired me earlier that week. The receptionist buzzed to tell me I had a visitor. Before I could answer, Ryan stormed through the heavy glass doors, his face purple with rage. I had warned the front desk about his potential arrival, but he had managed to bypass security with a desperate, frantic charm, the last card he had left to play. He had finally bypassed the escrow locks, only to discover the massive fraud flags attached to his offshore routing. He was cornered, and he had come to project his panic onto me. He slammed his hands on my desk, leaning over to threaten me. He snarled that I had ruined his pitch, that his investors were launching a full forensic audit, and that his lawyers were going to bury me. I didn't flinch. I calmly gestured for him to sit down. He hesitated, thrown off by my total lack of emotion, and slowly sank into the chair opposite my desk. I turned my monitor around so he could see the screen. "This wasn't about your company, Ryan," I said evenly. I tapped the space bar, projecting the master file onto the large presentation monitor on the wall. The obituary of the real Tiffany filled the screen, followed by the biometric mismatches, the forged social security documents, and the decade-old police report. I watched the color drain from his face as his brain tried to process the data. The illusion of power of an empty wallet is a spectacular thing to witness. People who build their entire lives on status, who measure their worth by the exclusivity of their possessions and partners, are entirely hollow. When you strip away the facade, there is no structural integrity left. Ryan was obsessed with high society validation, and he had anchored his entire identity to a woman who was literally a phantom. His reality was collapsing in real time. "Your perfect upgrade is a high school dropout who stole a dead girl's life," I stated, my voice devoid of inflection. "And you used her fraudulent accounts to embezzle your investors' capital." Right on cue, the heavy glass doors of my office opened again. Two uniformed police officers stepped inside, accompanied by the federal financial investigators to whom I had handed over the dossier weeks ago. Today was the day they finally moved to close the case. I had requested security to escort him out, but the federal agents arrived just as he began his outburst, ensuring the scene remained contained and professional. The officers approached Ryan, asking him to stand. At that exact moment, across town, another team was arriving at his townhouse to arrest Tiffany. The polished, flawless image he had murdered our marriage to protect was disintegrating in the middle of a public corporate office. He looked back at me, his eyes wide, silently begging for a lifeline, for the silent investor to cover his deficit one last time. But the ledger was closed. They weren't shocked by what they'd done. They were shocked that I'd stopped playing along. The weeks following their arrests were remarkably quiet. With Ryan and Tiffany facing federal indictments for wire fraud and identity theft, the noise of their smear campaign vanished completely. The mutual friends who had blindly shared their defamatory posts suddenly found themselves scrambling to apologize. I didn't reply to their messages. I simply blocked their numbers and focused on my new role at the engineering firm. The data architectures I was building now were complex, legitimate, and deeply satisfying. I stood by the window of my new apartment, watching the city lights flicker to life. The heavy, suffocating pressure of the last 5 years was entirely gone. I realized how much energy I had wasted trying to prop up a facade that was structurally unsound from the start. We spend so much time chasing the approval of people who value flashy surfaces over solid foundations. We twist ourselves into knots, trying to be the perfect supporting character in someone else's fabricated success story. I've come to realize that the hardest thing to let go of isn't the person who hurt you. It's the heavy burden of the false expectations you carried for them. Ryan's betrayal didn't destroy my life. It audited it. It forced me to look at where I was, investing my loyalty, and realize I was funding a deficit. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes it's the only way to set yourself free. I didn't forgive him for his actions, but I forgave myself for believing in his potential. True power isn't found in destroying someone else. It's found in the quiet, unshakable peace of knowing exactly who you are, without the need for a stolen face or an embezzled fortune. It's the freedom of standing in the light of the truth, unburdened by the exhaustion of maintaining a lie. I had reclaimed my life, not through vengeance, but through absolute, unflinching clarity. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need the courage to stand up today. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more true stories that help you shift your perspective and take back your own power.